Welcome to the Traders Network. Michael Yorba here, and I am also broadcasting to you from KFXR 1190 AM Clear Channel Studios in Dallas, Texas, and we're streaming from yorbamedia.com. All right, my first guest, Michael Bristow, President, CEO, ARCA Biopharma. Michael, welcome to the show. How you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you.
All right, my pleasure. Michael, give us a little background on who you are. Now, I think your symbol is ABIO, right?
Right, ABIO, and that's a biotechnology company that's based in the technology corridor between Boulder and Denver, Colorado. And ARCA does pharmacogenetic drug development, which means we develop drugs that interact favorably with certain genetic profiles that patients have that make them respond better to a drug than they otherwise would.
Okay. Thank you very much for that. Let's go back to your leadership here and give us a little background on you. That's what the company does. Let's talk about you first, and then we'll get back into ARCA Biopharma.
Sure. I'm a cardiologist, MD, with a PhD in pharmacology, and for many years I was in academics full-time, and about 20 years ago or so I began getting involved in biotech companies, founding them, and thus far have founded 4 of them, 3 in Colorado, 2 of which are still active, and 1 of which I spend a lot of time in, and that's ARCA Biopharma as the president and CEO.
Okay. All right. Now, your company's developing genetically target therapies for cardiovascular disease. Give us an idea of the depth of that. Open that up for us.
Right. So drugs obviously have targets, and those targets, in a lot of cases, exhibit genetic variation. And the idea of the company is to identify what that genetic variation is, then come up with how to exploit that from the standpoint of coming up with a drug, a specific molecule that will identify a genetic variant that it works better on than it does the counterpart variant, and it works better on that than any other drug does. And so it sounds very straightforward. We start, and it is in a sense, we start with candidate targets, and then basically figure out the genetic variation, figure out the biologic or pharmacologic significance of that, and then match it up with a drug, and then begin to develop that drug.
Okay. And talk to me about the development stage of it. Where are you on that?
Yeah, so we have one drug in late-stage development. The drug is called bucindolol. The trade name is Gincaro. It's in phase 3, about to start a phase 3 trial for prevention of atrial fibrillation.
What is that? That part that went right over my head. What is atrial fibrillation?
Yeah, atrial fibrillation is a common disorder. It's present in 2 to 4% of the population, and it's something that can bother people and cause stroke and cause the heart to deteriorate. And when the heart has some sort of functional or structural problem with it, that is, if there's some inherent disease in the heart, the drugs that prevent atrial fibrillation or treat atrial fibrillation are not very good. And so we're developing a drug for that patient population, a population with left ventricular dysfunction and or heart failure, which is, that population is especially prone to getting atrial fibrillation. We're developing a drug to prevent atrial fibrillation in that class of patients.
Well, that's amazing. Where are you on first to market with this type of thing? I mean, talk to me about the competition that you're dealing with and how you fit in with that.
Well, as people would tell, experts in the field would tell you, there really is not a good option for the roughly half of patients with atrial fibrillation that have something wrong with their heart. And so there are a number of things that are tried, but none of them essentially are approved or work really well. And the ones that work well if your heart is normal, preventing atrial fibrillation, really have problems when there's some disease in the heart muscle. And those problems are an increased predisposition to sudden death, for example. And so those drugs, most of those drugs have to be avoided. So it's really a wide open market, an unmet need in terms of a drug that actually can be used safely and effectively in this patient population.
So you really don't have a lot of people that are competing with you in this space that can actually take over the lead on this, is what I'm getting.
Yeah, so there are drugs that are not approved or are used off-label, but they don't work very well, or they have their own safety problems. And so in terms of an approved drug that actually works, no, we don't have any competition in this space.
Wow, that's a great place to be. It's an amazing place. All right, let's step forward just a little bit. You've had some pretty darn good accomplishments in 2013. Give our audience a background on that and bring us up to speed.
Right. So it's been 2013 was a good year. We achieved, first of all, regulatory clarity on the pathway to approval. That's where you have to start in this business. You have to have an understanding with FDA in terms of what it is that they want to see in terms of the data that they would approve you on. So that occurred in 2013 in a variety of communications and meetings. And so the idea is that with one trial, fairly small trial actually, 620 patients, if that trial is positive, that we would be approved. And so that clarity was achieved. We also entered into a partnership with Medtronic, and so the idea there is in the first 200 patients in the trial that we're about to start, the phase 3 trial, in the first 200 and then in another 200 after that, Medtronic's devices will be monitoring heart rhythm around the clock in these patients, and so the detection of atrial fibrillation will be much more sensitive with their monitoring devices generating that kind of data, and that provides a level of certainty in terms of the effect of the drug, basically. So we're in partnership with them. They provide all the monitoring devices. They basically analyze the data and then send that on to the data coordinating center, and that's really an invaluable service that they're providing in this trial. In addition, we shored up again a collaboration with Laboratory Corporation of America to do the genetic testing. We're not developing the genetic test that is required for this, so we're going for a certain genetic population. About half the population, you need a genetic test to detect that population, and Laboratory Corporation of America, LabCorp, is doing that, which is good. We don't have to worry about that, if you will. And finally, we secured the funding required to do the trial, the first part of the trial, which obviously is important. You can't start a trial without having the funding to do it. So 2013 was a very big year.
How much was the funding?
$20 million we raised last June.
Nice.
And another $9 million recently to top that off, enough to get through the first part of the trial.
Well, that's going to go, all right, through the first trial. I got that. Is there any forward motion with some of the big thresholds you've got across, like FDA acceptance and things of that nature?
Well, there's, the way we've designed this trial is an adaptive design, meaning that we basically first enroll 200 patients, mm-hmm. And the DSMB, the Data and Safety Monitoring Board, takes a look at that data and decides if that trial needs to be modified in any way, and decides whether or not the pre-trial assumptions are being met. And part of that is that there's evidence of efficacy. And so they then say, okay, this trial looks good. You can go ahead and finish the trial. So that part needs to be met. That's not an FDA issue. It's really a trial design issue. And so that will occur after 200 patients have been enrolled. The DSMB will look at the data and make that assessment.
Okay. All right. Let's do this. Michael, why don't we take just a moment? We'll take a break here, and we'll cover the rest of the conversation on the other side of the segments, okay?
Okay.
All right. Dr. Michael Bristow. We'll be right back with him. This is the ARCA Biopharma. Symbol on that company is, let me get that straight, ABIO, and we'll be right back. And I'm going to send out a special thanks to Monk Media and 1-800-PublicRelations.com for all their media and PR support. Welcome back to the Traders Network. I'm Michael Yorba, your host. Thanks for joining us. We are broadcasting to you live from the Dallas KFXR 1190 AM Clear Channel studios and streaming to you through our Yorba Media website. All right, I've got Michael Bristow, President and CEO, ARCA Biopharma, symbol ABIO, on the show with me today. Michael, welcome back to the segment. Appreciate that.
Okay.
Tell me, 2014. What does it look like for you? Give us some of the milestones you'd like to accomplish.
Yeah, the major milestones for 2014 are really execution of the trial, high quality execution in a timely fashion. So that's the obsession right now in the company, and clinical trials are complicated things, a lot of moving parts, and a lot of challenge, and so that's what we're focused on.
Okay. Are you going to be needing any additional funding for these projects that you got going through? Or is that $20 million that you raised in June really good?
Well, as a biotech company, you always are going to be needing additional funding. Let's put it that way. For this trial, we have adequate funding to get through the first part of this trial and have the Data and Safety Monitoring Board take a look at the data. So technically on this trial, we're okay in terms of where that funding needs to be.
Okay. What about the previously provided guidance? Walk us through that. Well, how does that look going forward?
In terms of the trial execution and so forth?
Yeah.
So first patient in is imminent. The guidance is first quarter 2014. We're actively up and recruiting at a couple of sites right now. Mm-hmm. More sites are being added almost every day. And then the first part of this trial that I've been talking about will take 2.5 years to execute. So that basically is the guidance that we've given.
Okay. Let's talk about the implementation of this trial. Drill down into that so that the people that are more laymen in the audience, like myself, really get a better feeling and a better understanding of what the mechanics are, what's going to transpire, and how things are going to unfold.
Yeah. Okay. Well, this is sort of like a major invasion, if you will, if you want some kind of analogy.
Yeah.
It's probably a little bit short of Normandy, but it's right up there. And so this is a multi-center trial. We're targeting at least 50 sites in the initial part of the trial. Mm. So that's 50 centers that you need to communicate with and get them up to speed in terms of what the trial design is and how you do it and so forth. They have to all have drug supply and they have to be monitored. There has to be a contract research organization looking after this. We're a fairly small biotech company, and so we don't do hands-on clinical trials ourselves, so we have to essentially contract with someone to do that. And that someone, in our case, is the Duke Clinical Research Institute, DCRI, which is a Duke University academic research organization. And they've done a lot of clinical trials in this space, in the atrial fibrillation space. So we have to essentially supervise them. We have to stay on top of everything they're doing and work with them on the details. And so we have a clinical trials and regulatory group at ARCA that does that, and this is literally a full-time job for many people, communicating with DCRI and getting this trial up and running, and then as it gets up and running, then keeping it going.
Right. I can see that that's going to be a big part of your business. What about this? What I'm hearing is that you might be considering an epidemic cardiovascular disease, working on that one.
Well, atrial fibrillation is considered to be an epidemic or a pandemic. Pandemic means a small epidemic, if you will, all over the world. Actually, I mean, any place where there's a developed country or one in development, they're estimated to be over 30 million people worldwide with this, and anywhere from 2.7 to 6 million in the U.S. and that is increasing every year virtually. So most cardiovascular disease is decreasing over time, thank goodness. Mm-hmm. But there are a couple of them that are increasing, and this is one of them. The other is heart failure, chronic heart failure. And these two are related. That is, if you have heart failure, you're more prone to getting atrial fibrillation, or if you have atrial fibrillation, you're more prone to getting heart failure. Some of this has to do with the aging population, but a lot of it has to do with not dying from other cardiovascular diseases, such as not dying from a heart attack, but having some damage done to the heart, which then leads to things like heart failure and atrial fibrillation. So as we've succeeded on certain fronts in cardiovascular disease, other things have become more prevalent.
Like
atrial fibrillation and heart failure, chronic heart failure.
Okay. Now, I'm not an expert in your field. I'm just trying to find out as much as I can. But is there anything out there with regarding the beta blockers at making such a having to be a factor in what you're doing?
Right. So beta blockers, your audience, most people will have heard of the term beta blocker. They're probably the most successful single class of drug in all of cardiovascular disease. They've been around for a long time. They're very safe and very effective on several fronts, and they do have a small effect in preventing atrial fibrillation. And so in order to do this trial, we're not comparing our results to placebo. We're comparing our results to a standard beta blocker that doesn't have the pharmacogenetic enhancement of effect in the genetic population that we're in. And so our drug, just to give you some numbers, our drug will prevent atrial fibrillation to the tune of 74%, a reduction in atrial fibrillation by 74% in this patient population, after this genetic population, whereas standard drugs will prevent it to the tune of 20 to 30%. And so we're running against one of those standard drugs. The good news is that these are both drugs that are effective, one more effective than the other, hopefully. They're very safe. And so if you're in this trial, essentially, you're getting standard therapy. You're getting the best therapy you can get and the possibility of getting the next generation better therapy in the process.
All right. Now, I've gone about as far as I can go when it comes to questions that I can come up with about your company and your processes. Let's talk a little bit about the business side of, because obviously you've got some pretty good investors behind you. I think that you just acquired $20 million. What do you see going forward of the information you can talk about? What do you see going forward regarding the business side of this? How things are panning out for you, for the investors that have come along and decided that they want to be on your rising star?
Yeah, I think the investors we have are pretty sophisticated. They understand the science, they understand the data, and they're basically placing a bet that the science that exists so far and the clinical trial data we have so far, the phase 2 data, if you will, predict a good outcome, and so they're placing that bet. Mm-hmm. From their standpoint, our market cap value is under what most companies with a phase 3 asset would be, and so they're obviously, the investors are counting on a pretty good uptick in valuation if we succeed, and that's basically the value proposition that they're playing.
And I take it that you are very confident that that's what's going to happen, obviously, and so are they. Otherwise,
well, you don't do these things unless you're confident that your assumptions are correct and right. You can pull it off. Right. Having said that, this is drug development, and you go into phase 3 almost invariably thinking you're going to win, right. And you don't always win. That's just the vagaries of drug development and clinical trials.
So, in other words, you're exceptionally confident that we're going to go into phase 3. I'm taking ownership here because I really like the technical pattern. And with that accomplished, do you see that there would be anybody coming up behind you in the near term, or were you pretty much going to end up owning this space?
No, we don't see any drugs in development, even in entering phase 1, essentially, that could be used effectively in a LV dysfunction / heart failure patient population, because all of them, the ones that are in development, have the properties that make them unsafe in this patient population. They're ion channel inhibitor drugs, mm-hmm. And those drugs invariably cause trouble when you get into heart failure and left ventricular dysfunction. So what you need for that population is a drug that prevents the rhythm disturbance, the atrial fibrillation, but also makes the underlying left ventricular function and heart failure better, and that's what our drug does. And there's no other drug on the horizon that does that.
Wow, that is a bold statement, and I'm glad you were able to make it here. We're about out of time, but do you have any place where people can come to and get more information about what we spoke about, white papers, research, public events, that where people can step up and shake your hand about this?
Well, sure. Our website has information on it, and we obviously are publicly traded, so we put out lots of guidance, and all those are available through the website. You can get the links to that, to those. That's probably the easiest thing. We typically present at national meetings if anyone's a scientist and wants to know more. And obviously, you can email us directly, and we can send you whatever information is in the public domain. And that information is all on the website.
Perfect. ARCA Biopharma.com?
Exactly.
Right. And symbol for your stock again for our audience?
ABIO.
Perfect. All right, Michael, thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate the information you brought to us today.
Okay, thank you, Michael.
My pleasure. Michael Bristow, he is the CEO of ARCA Biopharma. And I want to send a special thank you out to Monk Media and 1-800-PublicRelations.com for all their PR and media support. Stick around. We got a new CEO coming on, MAXD, and it's called Max Sound. John Blazier. This guy has got something that the world is going to get their hands on immediately. We'll be right back.